Welcome to the Daily Grind. My name is Kelly Johnson, your fun and friendly host. We are on episode 22 of season 2, the very best one yet. I wanted to give a quick shout out to John Pound Photography. We worked with John on our podcast, Brand Photography, and the portraits turned out incredible. He was very professional, and I enjoyed the entire photo shoot experience. I would highly recommend him for anyone needing quality portraits. If you are located in the Milwaukee area, reach out to John at johnpoundphotography.com. Thank you, John. Before we go live with our special guest, here's your fast fact of the day. The speed of a computer mouse is measured in Mickeys. A British scientist first invented the rollerball device in 1946 while working for the Royal Navy, but the word mouse didn't get coined until 1965. There's your fast fact of the day. We're going to do a brief introduction to our special guest. Dr. Ki Chan is a passionate teacher of the science and management of health and wellness, a speaker and writer on management and leadership, podcast host of What is Public Health podcast, and researcher of economics and genomics. She lives and works in the Milwaukee area. We'd like to welcome to the show Dr. Ki Chan.
Thank you so much, Kelly. It's so great to see you again. And thank you so much for this opportunity to be on your podcast. I know that I met you early this year when you organized the fundraising event and you were looking for vendors that were focused on health and wellness. And I applied to be a vendor at your event, and where I was selling my mala beads meditation protocol. So I make mala beads and I write books on health and wellness, and also sell essential oils. So I have my little booth, and that's how I got to meet you and learn more about your awesome podcast, which is The Daily Grind, and also that I also host a podcast too. So we totally connected beyond just like you hosting the great fundraising event. So thank you again for this opportunity to be a part of one of your awesome initiatives. So thank you. So audience of who listens to the Daily Grind, I'm really excited to be here today in Kelly's podcast, so you can learn a little bit more about me and maybe spark interest in you about public health or health and wellness careers. I'm originally from Los Angeles, California. My parents are from Hong Kong, so I'm Chinese. I was born in the U.S., so I'm Asian American. And currently, my husband and I live in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. People always ask me like, how can you leave California where it's like 70 degrees all year round? Believe it or not, it can get kind of boring in California with the weather just constantly the same shiny weather all the time. I wanted to experience the four seasons, and I applied for graduate school in the East Coast. So after I graduated from undergraduate and my master's in University of California, San Diego, living in La Jolla, which is also another awesome place where not only do you have 70 degrees weather, but you're close to the beach. And literally there was parts of the campus at UCSD that you can have an ocean view. So I know I gave all of that up because I want to experience the four seasons. I really want to experience how it felt to walk in snow. I really want to see changing the leaves. So when I had an opportunity to apply for schools, I decided I'm just going to apply to the East Coast, and any of the schools that picked me, I'll just attend. And I was very fortunate that I got accepted to Yale University School of Public Health, and that really changed the course of my career and life. And I pretty much stayed in the East Coast ever since then. We moved around, and currently we've been here in Milwaukee for over 5 years now. And we really like it here also in the Midwest. We see the changing the leaves. So that's a little bit about me, about how I left California to be here in Milwaukee. And Milwaukee is a great place. I really like the Midwestern culture. People are very nice, very humble, down to earth. I really like that. And we also experienced the four seasons. Although winter is a little bit longer than I wanted, it's like 6 months, but it's okay. I remember, what was it, 2 years ago, that it was April and it was still snowing. So I thought, wow, I did get my wish that I'm experienced the four seasons. A little bit about what I do is I teach topics on public health, specifically on management and leadership. I do research in public health, and I think now everyone knows what public health is. Since the coronavirus pandemic, you see public health professionals working in all sorts of areas, from epidemiology, um, running models, people who are in the front line, people who are in the community. So I feel that public health is getting some good PR during this coronavirus pandemic. I'm also currently working on a textbook called Advanced Management and Leadership in Improving Population Health. The publisher is Jones Barkley and Learning. So I'm very excited that I'm working on this book with my co-author who've been working in the field of public health for over 50 years. So we're both co-author on this book where I'm going to provide more of the content and more teaching pedagogy, and he's going to be sharing his work experience in the public health sector. I also write articles on health and wellness, and I published a book for the lay audience called The Wellness Plan, The DNA Guide to Healthy Living. And I actually gave a copy to Kelly as a thank you gift for hosting such an awesome fundraising event. And I'm hoping to share some of the tips from that book that will be applicable to your life, especially during now when we're all cooped in and maybe feeling a little stressed from the coronavirus pandemic, and also that the holidays are coming up. And so, adding on top of that, so how can we balance our life and also incorporate some good wellness tips? So, I'll be happy to share some of those tips. And this book, what makes it a little different is that it's based on scientific evidence and research and easy to use tips on incorporating wellness habits into your life. And I call these the 7 dimensions of wellness. And you're probably wondering, what are these 7 dimensions of wellness? So we'll get to that. So definitely stay tuned to the end of this episode. I'll go over what those 7 dimensions are. And actually, this is based on a class that I taught at Stanford University at Palo Alto, California. And it was a course that I developed and it was online, and it was great because it allowed people from all over the world to take this class. So I had students from Spain, from all parts of Europe, and from Africa, some and all over the place, and also in all over the place in U.S. attending my class and learning about how to take better care of themselves. And believe it or not, I would say about a quarter of the people that was in my class were physicians, doctors. And you're probably wondering, like, how is it possible that doctors are taking this class about health and wellness? Believe it or not that a career in healthcare is very stressful. And doctors are so focused on taking care of someone else that they sometimes neglect their own health. And so that's what this class was about self-care and how you can incorporate self-care in the 7 dimension of wellness. That wellness doesn't sound like this humongous abstract thing that I have to achieve, but you can design your own wellness plan. And so, how physicians can learn to take better care of themselves mentally, physically, intellectually, and spiritually so they could be better, more attentive physicians. And then a quarter of my other students were CEOs who are like working nonstop. So they were really stressed out about things. So, how do you incorporate these wellnesses when you're on the road all the time? So I think 7 dimensional wellness is a very practical way of thinking about wellness. So it doesn't sound like this gigantic mountain you have to achieve, but there's actually little milestones that you can achieve, and that you're actually figuring out what cornerstone of wellness that you need to focus on. So, as a side hustle that I do is I have an online Etsy store called Zenergy Mala. That Zenergy. So it's energy with a Z, Zenergy Mala. That this so my store is about making these mala beads for meditation. And the way I came about this was that when I was teaching my class, the 7 dimensional wellness, students didn't really know how to meditate. And so I told them that, well, you can meditate using mala beads. So like something tactile, you can actually touch. And when each time you touch something like this bead, you say a mantra, like a phrase. And so, or you just breathe, like each time you touch a bead, you inhale and you move your finger to the next bead and you exhale. And so by inhale and exhale and using the beads to kind of help dictate your breathing pattern, it helps declutter your mind, because when you are inhaling and exhaling, you're focusing on just that pattern of breathing. And if you're touching something, right, especially people who are very fidgety, they like to like those fidget spinners, right? Why were those famous? It's because people need to touch something to have something on their hands because they're very they lose their attention very easily. So the same idea. So mala beads are the same way that by using these beads to meditate, you've probably seen these monks do this all the time. They wear these big mala beads and they're meditating. And you're probably thinking, oh, it's only for monks. But no, like that's what mala beads are for. And it's became a fashion statement that you see a lot of people doing yoga or in the wellness space wear mala beads because it's very pretty. And they're pretty because they're made of very beautiful gemstones. But the purpose of mala beads is actually a meditation tool. So I taught my students how to make mala beads and how to use it to meditate. And you could be at a conference, you could be at a boardroom, and you wear your mala bead, and no one notices it. And when you're feeling a little stressed or a little agitated, you just say your mantra or you inhale and exhale and you touch your mala bead and it brings you back to that place of calm, especially when you're in a place of chaos. And just a few seconds, you will lower your blood pressure, your breathing pattern will go back to normal. And it's just a such a simple tip. So that's how I came about in making these mala beads. And so I started making them for my students, and then people ask about more about them. So I just, I since I bought a whole bunch of Mala beads to make, I'll just put it up on Etsy and sell it. And so that's where I came up with the idea of selling these Mala beads. And I also added these lava beads, which are porous, so you can add essential oils on there. So you can also have that aromatherapy benefit when you add your favorite essential oils onto the lava beads, which is a part of the Mala bead bracelet. So that's how I came about and creating the Malabi um, jewelry line, which is how I met Kelly when I was holding my vendor booth. And people are probably thinking like, okay, this is like a random person who just like she's a professor, she teaches, she does research, and she's selling Mala beads. But it all kind of comes together because it was something that came about from just my passion of teaching health and wellness to my students and just my general interests. And so that's how that's one of my side hustle. And then at the end of December 2019, I had a New Year's resolution. And we all make this, right? On December, right? We kind of reflect back on what we've done during that year, what we are currently doing, and what we hope to do the next year. I don't think anyone predicted the coronavirus pandemic in the year 2020, but in late 2019, I thought, I'm going to start my podcast. Like, I realized that it's something that I've been very interested in doing, but something was holding me back. And a lot of it was fear. And it's funny because here I am a teacher. I've been teaching for over 20 years, working in research and giving talks at national, international conferences. And I thought, like, why am I afraid of making an episode or making a podcast? And I just thought, well, maybe it just seems so technical and you're really you're putting yourself out there. And then it wasn't until one of my students actually encouraged me by telling me that they really enjoy listening to my videos. And because I also teach online, I teach online classes. And when they said that, I said, well, you're not watching my videos? Like, oh, yeah, we watch it sometimes, but we're actually listening to you. I'm like, how do you do that? He goes, well, I take the train or I'm driving in the car and I'm listening to your lecture because most of my students are working, right? Because, doctors or CEOs and they're busy people. And so they're listening to my videos. And I thought, oh, well, I never thought about that as being another medium to connect with people. And so it was through those conversations I decided to start my podcast and see that if that would work as a way to spread the message about public health, which is the area that I work in. So that's how I came about hosting my podcast. And the title of my podcast is called What is Public Health? With a question mark. And because that is the most common question I get asked is, what do you do? And I say, I work in public health. I teach in public health. And I literally get like a 1 to 2 second blank stare. And I ask, do you know what it is? Do you know what public health is? And then they usually say, oh, yeah, it's kind of like going to the doctor and, getting your healthcare needs. I go, well, yeah, kind of. But public health is about all the preventive measures, like, keeping you healthy, the policies and programs, like washing your hands, all those policies so that it keeps you healthy so you're not going to be so sick to go to the doctor. So it is somewhat related to healthcare. And so that's when I realized that, oh, wouldn't it be great to have a podcast that just educate people about what is public health, but also not it to be a lecture, a podcast of lecture, because people go to school to do that, but more about stories, like people who actually work in public health, for them to share their story about what they do so that people can learn, oh, that's what public health is. Well, I didn't know that's related to public health. And and so that's how I came about in starting my podcast. And during this whole coronavirus pandemic, podcasting has been my saving grace for me to connect with colleagues and share what they're doing, especially how they're contributing their efforts in addressing the coronavirus pandemic. And so I'm very happy that I have this podcast as my way to connect with people while I'm working from home. And my podcast is really about sharing stories about people who are working in public health and who are impacted by public health. So I like to call these people the superheroes, the superheroes who are the invisible force that works in public health to keep you healthy, and you probably don't even know about them. So that's why I want to share their stories. So
Wonderful.
that's a little bit about me. That was a lot about me, actually.
Yeah, you have quite the daily grind. As you can tell, listeners out there, what she's talked about, her own story, what makes her unique. Like I mentioned, she's a true daily grinder in regards to she's teaching topics and researching, talking about public health. She's an author. She's working on a lot of different great ideas. She's got a side hustle. She's just created this podcast. We have a lot of similarities in common, which is great. And again, yeah, like she mentioned, we met at the MKE Run Fit Fest. So perfect timing actually recording this episode. I just got an email from a potential vendor asking about, oh, what's going to happen 2021. Well, I'm hoping to have the event go on next year, but we'll stay tuned and keep up the grind. And yeah, we'll just keep on pushing through and coming across. And again, this is really fitting as well since you are in public health and what you mentioned earlier, we didn't predict the coronavirus to happen in 2020. So I think just all these pieces of the puzzle fit together, and here we are on the Daily Grind, episode 22, to learn more about your story. Again, share your knowledge in public health in that industry with our listeners out there in the world. So this is really great. Excited to have you on, and yeah, let's get right into the details. Yeah, I guess first and foremost, mentioned Asian American. You came from the LA. You were living in LA. Now you're in Wisconsin, which is great. But how did you become interested, I guess, in science and the management of health and wellness and public health? Did you have family like working in that area, or just kind of through school you became interested in that?
Yeah. So my parents are not in the health or wellness field. They're businesses. They're in businesses. And the way I came about how I became interested in this area of public health and specifically the science and management of health and wellness is through my education and also through work experience and personal experience. So I've always been interested in science and a little bit of management. So I knew that I was interested in both. Like so I think of my business probably from my genes from my parents. Like they're all into the businesses. But we were interested in the science. And I knew that I didn't like blood or needles. So being a doctor was probably not a plan for me. But when I heard about public health, I thought like, what is that? So I was my senior year of college, and my advisor said, you might want to attend this seminar on public health. And I thought, what is that? I never heard of that before. And I attended the seminar, and it just blew me away that, oh my God, there's this whole field of careers that I could work in different capacity to improve health of people at a population level. So I can almost be like a medical doctor, but not have to deal with the blood and needle, and but not have to deal with one-on-one, but more of a population level. So it kind of really fit all my interests and attributes of what I would like to have a career on, which is, I can work with people. It's related to science and health. I can always study and learn more about the topic. So that's something I liked about public health was that there's always new information, there's new research, so you're constantly educating yourself about new information and how that could help improve current standards, current programs, and policy. That's what I liked about that. And I like the fact that it gave me the freedom to address address health issue at a population level. So it removed I guess for some people, if they like the one-on-one, for doctors, they like the one-on-one, they like to be able to follow up with one patient at a time or a whole cohort of patient. But for me, like, I didn't, that wasn't really what motivated me about health was that what I liked about health and wellness was how can I address issue at a population level, like how can like we can create policies that not only affects one person but a whole community, and or a program that can benefit mothers and children, or how to create better projects for specific communities that are in need. And so I realized that that was more where I fit better because I like working in teams. So I knew that was a people person, and I like to see like the outcome of our work to have more of a mass impact than one on one. And so I knew that that was what my characteristic of what I like about a job, and also the flexibility to constantly learn. So that's why I liked about a career in public health. And the main difference for me, I think, about being a public health versus a doctor is that doctors work one on one addressing about health issues, and working in public health, you address similar health issues, but at a larger scale. And so we look at how to make this community live healthier, happier, and longer. So, for folks who are listening to this podcast, if that sparks your interest and you're curious about career in public health, definitely check out one of my podcast episodes. My podcast is called What is Public Health? And I did an episode on the top 20 emerging careers in public health in the year 2020. But it's also evergreen because a lot of these careers are going to be longstanding. They're not going to go away. If anything, they're in need. And the episode is actually based on my discussion with leaders in the field of public health. So I spoke with directors of public health, State Department, CDC, NIH, many of the different organizations that work in public health. And they shared with me what are some of the top jobs and careers that are in great need. And so in my episode, I talked about the education level, the qualification, like work experience. So maybe you don't have the master's degree, but maybe you have 10 years of work experience. Like that could be equivalent to having a career in that particular sector. I talk about the salary ranges, and that's something I think everyone's always interested in because you also want to be mindful that okay, if you're interested in this job, does it make sense to get extra years of education if it's only going to pay you this much, or is there another career that can help satisfy that need? And also the work environment. So if you're interested about career in public health or transitioning, definitely check out that episode. And is also one of my other side hustles. I do a lot of consultation, and so if you're interested in this and you need some help in like revamping or revising your resume or CV, definitely reach out to me. And at the end of this episode, I'll share the way you can connect with me.
Definitely. Yep. Really well said, Key. Listeners, we will put Key's contact info and where to find her podcast and tune in today's show notes as always. That's incredible. I love your story. Just come in. Again, it's just like, that timing is perfect in regard to, oh, I should tune into this seminar. And then here we are today. Fast forward today. Now you're working in public health. So it's really great how the world goes around in a sense. But yeah, so you have quite the resume in regards to public health. So you have your master's degree, PhD. You're doing further research, fellowship training. The list could go on and on and on. We could talk for days on your background, but pursuing, just going through that entire process to where you are today, what are some challenges and success stories in your current role that you've come across, I guess recently, or however, whatever you'd like to share with us on the daily grind?
Well, some of the positive outcomes are that sometimes you work on a project and when you see a positive impact or your program or project is implemented, then that's always a very highlight, right? It's a very good positive to that. And I guess one of the successful stories in my background is I worked at the National Institution of Health at NIH in Bethesda, Maryland. So after graduate school from Yale, I was very fortunate to get a fellowship. Actually, this was during my graduate graduate time at Yale. I was very fortunate to get a post like a pre-doctoral research fellowship that allowed me to do some of my research at NIH while I was a Yale student. And so I just had to go back and forth in presenting my data to my committee. So I was really fortunate to work at NIH. And during that time, I was working in the laboratory and I helped co-develop a genetic test for severe combined immunodeficiency, which is called SCID, which is known as a bubble boy disease. I'm not sure if people know what SCID is, which is severe combined immunodeficiency, but maybe most people know what bubble boy disease. The bubble boy disease was actually made into a movie back in the 70s where a guy lived in a bubble and it was a comedy. But in reality, so a kid actually did live in a bubble. And why did this kid live in a bubble? So when babies are born with severe combined immunodeficiency, SCID, also known as the bubble boy disease, is that they have a very impaired immune system. So their immune system isn't working. And you can imagine a baby that's born into this world, and they were living in your womb, they were protected, right? Now they're outside in the world and there's all these bacterias and they could easily get infected. But because they have the mother's antibodies, the first few months of life, they're okay. But then usually around years at the age of 3 months or so, they tend to get sick, especially if they have SCID, because the maternal antibodies are starts to decrease. And at that point, the baby's immune system hopefully would have been educated to boost an immune response to any type of infection. So kids are always touching everything, right? So they get sick, but they bounce back up. But babies with SCID, they oftentimes don't because their immune system isn't working at birth because they're born with a genetic disease. And so we developed this genetic test to screen for babies with SCID at birth so that when they are caught early on at birth within the first 24 to 48 hours of birth, which is part of the newborn screening panel. So every baby in the United States, 4 million babies are born every year. They are screened for between 30 to 60 metabolic genetic disorders. And these disorders are rare, but if a baby is affected with one of these disorders, they can get treatment, and these treatments are usually very practical. It's either dietary change, either some type of surgery, or in the case of SCID, the bubble boy disease, is bone marrow transplant. So basically reconstituting your immune system. And so when a baby has SCID, they can get their immune system basically get re-educated by bone marrow transplant, and they can live a very healthy life. So there's data that if you can if the baby is transplanted within the first month of life, they have a 95 survival rate. If they are transplanted with this bone marrow transplant at the age of 6 months or older, their survival rates drops to 50% or lower. So you can see that there's importance of screening early and getting treated early. And that is a public health initiative. So this is an example of how you combine scientific evidence to make a public health mandate, which is to have babies screened based on evidence. And so newborn screening is one of a major public health accomplishment. And it's supported by the public health department. Babies are screened every day. Like I said, there's 4 million babies born every year. And so your health department is doing such a great job in caring for your kids. And I don't think a lot of people know that. Like, I don't think a lot of parents or family knows that this is going behind the scene. And that's the thing about public health. A lot of the work we do is invisible, right? Because you go to your doctor and you either have an issue and the doctor gives you care and medication, but all the screening that is done, for example, newborn screening, it's done behind the scene. And unless your child has a positive screen, you don't get notified. So if it's a negative, which is a good thing, you don't get notified. So again, like, our work is invisible, but that's the point, right? Because this is very rare. We can't contact everybody, whether you got a negative, because that would be a lot of people. So we only contact people who are positive. So that's an example of how, like, the work that you do, you see a positive, it's actually being implemented. But one of the challenges of public health is that it does take time. So our work was published in 2005. That was like 15 years ago when we published this publication. It actually didn't get implemented until 5 years later, around like 2010. And then Wisconsin was one of the first states to actually screen for SCID, and then Massachusetts. But again, that was 5 or 6 years after the test was developed. And then it took another 10 years for all the states to slowly start to implement screening for SCID. So this is just an example of how the success of public health you is really based on patience, that you don't see the fruits of your work until maybe years or decades later. And so now in the year 2021, this test is now being used worldwide. I mean, nationwide here in the US, and also in Europe, and also in Asia. So this is an example of how policy making does take time. And so if you are very impatient, you may not think this may not be the field for you. But if you're willing to work as a team and knowing that your work will pay off, it just takes time, because policy is just takes time. And that's the challenge of public health, is that everything just takes time. It's just because we're talking about working at a population level, right? Making policy changes that is going to affect everybody. And so that's one of the big challenges, is that everything takes time, and it's just, and hopefully you have the patience to stick around to see the fruits of your efforts.
Really well said. That's a great example for our listeners out there listening to the Daily Grind. I really like that you took the story in regards to the key takeaways here: being patient, taking that hard work and dedication and effort to make this. To overcome those challenges in a sense, but yeah, it's on your daily grind, it's on your radar, it's something you have to keep on pushing, and that comes down to your motivation, your interest in what you do, and if you enjoy your work and the field of study that you currently what your current role is, basically. So, yeah, getting back to my next question, I guess. Your research interests are, medical decision making, infectious diseases, public health, genomics and chronic diseases, strategic management and financial analysis, maternal and child health, like all those interests. How'd you become like narrow it down? Because public health is such a big topic. How'd you narrow it down to those particular interests? And tell me a little bit more about that motivation and passion behind working in those areas.
Yeah, that was a laundry list of like so many topics. I didn't realize that it actually sounds kind of scatterbrained. There's so many topics. But I think that's just how my brain works is that I get interested in what is important today. And I think one thing that I notice about what threads through all those different topics that you list in the laundry list is that I'm very interested in the strategy of things, like how to be strategic. And my research really focuses on developing cost effectiveness. Like I develop cost effectiveness models, seeing like what's the cost benefit of implementing this versus implementing X, Y, and Z. And I show these models because it's based on evidence and maybe some assumptions you run these models. And I think people might understand what I mean by models. So for example, the coronavirus pandemic, right? When they decide to close down or reopen or in-state mask wearing, it's based on models, right? So they run these models, and then when you run these models, it's based on assumptions and simulations based on some data, but you make some assumptions like if 100% of people wear masks, this will be the rates of death. If 90% of people wear masks, this would be X, Y, and Z. So that's what a model is. And so those are the type of models I develop. That's more specific on looking at the costs and benefits of implementing programs. And that's always been my interest is medical decision making is how can we be more efficient in our resources in order to make massive impact. And that's what I guess my mantra is like I really don't like seeing things being wasteful, and there could be different ways to utilize our workforce or capacity and funding to maximize impact to the general public. And the topics really vary. So I've always been interested in newborn screening. It just happened to be part of my interest since my PhD time. But over the years, I got interested in different topics because new opportunities came to me. So when I was in Boston, I gave a talk about newborn screening and cost effectiveness again at a seminar. And it just so happened a person in the audience was in a leadership position working at the Veterans Affairs, the VA hospital, so the VA Veterans Affairs Department in Boston. And so the VA, in addition to serving medical care for veterans, they also have a research unit. So they actually do research, healthcare services research, to assess new programs, new policies to provide better care for veterans. And so this person was sitting in the audience, and even though it was a topic on newborn screening, he really resonated with the models that I was developing because he knew that, would you be interested in working for the VA developing cost effective models to assess some of our programs? I mean, it won't be on newborn screening, but it will be applicable to like new programs happening in the VA. And I was really honored that someone was interested in my methods. So I worked for them for about 5 years and I worked on HIV and hepatitis C. So that's how I got interested in infectious disease. And learn more about the HIV programs and different medications to care for hepatitis C patients in the VA. And so I worked on various programs looking at health services, looking at medication adherence, different types of telehealth, telemedicine platforms to provide care for veterans. And so that's how I got interested in that. And then over the years, when there's new projects or new initiatives, like for example, right now is the coronavirus pandemic. So, thinking about how is coronavirus impacting education, impacting health, impacting vulnerable communities is another topic of interest of mine right now. So again, I think that's one of the values of having a degree in public health because you really learn methodology. And once you learn the methods like epidemiology or biostatistics, or in my case, policymaking and modeling, you can apply that to various different topics. So you're never pigeonholed in one area. And I think that makes you very marketable and makes your skill sets diversible. And especially right now in the coronavirus pandemic, you can see that a lot of businesses that weren't able to diversify themselves closed down. But the business that were able to pivot quickly is surviving. So again, thinking about how to make your skill sets and methods as a marketing skill so that you can pivot quickly when there's an opportunity that arises. So that's how I got interested in my topics is that opportunities present themselves.
Again, yeah, really well said, Key. I love that you're going really behind the scenes in regards to public health, which is really interesting. I think you're our first guest on the podcast in that industry, which is amazing. So, really shedding some light here in regards to the coronavirus, what's on your daily grind. And it's really cool how you put together those pieces, applying. Again, these key takeaways are super important. Diversifying yourself out there, building your skill set so you're well rounded to solve, those complex problems in your own industry as well. Not just I could apply what we talk about today on this health, public health related episode to my own daily grind in the business corporate setting as well. Finding new ways, being creative, to working with the team and optimizing ways to improve the cost and benefit ratio. So which is really cool. So I love what you're providing to us on the daily grind here. So yeah, speaking of your daily grind, what are some of the favorite things to do outside your daily grind of public health? How do you find that work life balance?
So, I'm all about health and wellness. So, definitely, I'm all for self care because self care is not selfish. I think it's so important to incorporate that. So, for me, I always start my morning doing some yoga and Pilates. Like, that's just my thing. Like, I just go to my YouTube channel and watch, different type of yoga or Pilates videos based on the topics. Like if I wanted to stretch my back or a lower back issue, I'll find a yoga or Pilates video on that. Before the coronavirus pandemic, I would actually go to a yoga class and Pilates class, which is down the street from me. But because of the coronavirus pandemic, I'm just doing everything inside. But I always do something in the morning, regardless if I'm able to go to a class or not. I have a yoga mat. I have all my gear because I'm also another side hustle is I'm a certified Pilates instructor as well.
Oh wow,
And people ask me like, how did you even squeeze that in when you have all these other things? So how did I realize self-care is so important? So remember in the beginning of my story, I said that I worked in the lab for several years at the NIH. So one thing about working in a lab is you're in these really weird positions. You're standing on the bench and you're hunched over and you're like working on these test tubes and you have these kits, and you could be standing for hours or in the hood doing a lot of different types of experiments, and it has to be in a very isolated environment. So once you're in this room, there's no you don't go outside to get water. You got to stay in this room for hours to do this experiment. And so you're in these positions or sitting for long periods of time. And over time, when I was working there, I developed lower back pain, and it was so painful that I actually had to sleep on the floor. That was the best position to feel comfortable, was a hardwood floor. I don't know, maybe my bed was too soft, but after I realized when I was doing that, I realized, okay, I can't be working in public health or getting a degree in public health, and I'm not even practicing good public health hygiene, like taking better care of myself. Here I am, like overworked, overtired, and I'm getting lower back pain at in my 20s. This can't be happening. So that's when I took a pause and reassessed my life. And I started to take yoga classes and Pilates and do some meditation, just slow down what I was doing. And I took dance classes too, just to get my body moving. And I realized that in order for me to be more efficient at my work, I had to be also very effective in how I was taking better care of myself. And so that's when I started to take really like like an inward look about how I was designing my life. And so I decided to just study more about Pilates. And I picked Pilates because it was almost like physical therapy, but not quite physical therapy. That I want to go back to school for another degree. But so Pilates was like a nice medium that I could learn about the anatomy, certain types of exercises that you could do to help strengthen your lower back, like certain positions, certain types of exercises you could do throughout the day. Because if you're sitting all day, you want to work on your hip flexors. Or if you're standing up all day, then you might want to work on some squats or some exercises with the wall or using balls. Or so you learn a lot of little different techniques that you could incorporate into your life when you do Pilates. And that's one thing I really liked about that was that I was like, "Oh, I could just bring these little balls at work." And so when I'm sitting at the desk on my computer, I can put these little balls. They're like tennis balls. Just put these tennis balls, like 2 tennis balls on the sole of your feet and I guess make sure the floor is clean wherever you're at and because you're barefoot, is roll it back and forth. And by doing that, it can really help energize your whole body. And that's just a simple thing. You're already sitting there, just take an extra little effort and just rolling using tennis ball. Now, for example, if you've been typing a lot, maybe your wrist is hurting. You could use those same tennis balls and roll it around your wrist, and that can help massage some of your fascia. And sometimes we get stiff because our fascia is very, very stiff and it's not hydrated. So you can just walk around. And even something as simple as walking around by swinging your arms. And this is something I've noticed with my students when I was teaching Pilates is that a lot of people have lower back issues, and a lot of it is not. A lot of it is because they're holding their phone on one hand, and they're looking at it, and so their neck is looking at their phone while they're walking, so they're straining their neck, and they're not swinging their arms. So only one arm is swinging. Or women, we tend to hunch our back when we hold our purse with one arm, right? So we're not swinging arm. So you look back in the caveman years, they didn't have purse or cell phones, and they walk normally by swinging their arms. And that's the natural way of walking. So, the best way, a tip for your listeners, if you're having any back issue or you can't sleep because you have back issues, is instead of wearing a purse that's a crossbody purse, you can swing your arms when you're walking or a backpack. And if you need to look at your phone, is bring it up to your face level so you don't have a neck strain, or just put away your phone so you're swinging your arms when you're walking. And you just change this simple habit of swinging your arms when you're walking, it can really relieve a lot of back pain. And so those are the practices I learned from Pilates. And I thought, wow, wouldn't it be great to just actually be certified as an instructor to learn more? So I just decided to just go through the training. So I'm certified as a Pilates instructor on mat work and reformer, if for resistant training. So I really like that. And I incorporate this as just part of my own daily life. Like if I have back issues or maybe I overstress something, I would just practice my Pilates moves. And in the evening before I go to sleep, I like to just do a slow yoga movement, some meditation practices with my Molly beads, and it just really helps sets the day and it helps set the day when I do the Pilates in the morning, and at the end of the night when I do Pilates or yoga, at the end of the day, it just really helps set the tone to kind of rest my body. And even just 15 minutes, like people think that they have to spend like a whole hour because it's a yoga class. No, really, just 10 to 15 minutes every day. And I'm like, where would you find that 10 minutes? Well, when you're making coffee, right? You're standing there, you could just do like 5 moves and there's your 10 minutes. Or while you're waiting for the bus or for the subway, you do these moves while you're standing on the platform. So there's so many ways you incorporate these 10 to 15 minutes, even if you don't have that extra hour to go to class. And so that's these are the things I learned as being an instructor, like how to make these type of practices practical in someone who's working, 24/7, or a working mom or anyone that how do you incorporate this? So these are easy tips you can do. And so that's one of my favorite things I like to do, some Pilates and yoga and do my meditation using my Molly beads. And in the morning when I wake up is I always wear my Molly beads. So today I'm wearing my purple amethyst, and each of the Molly beads gemstone represents a different types of energy. I like to think of it that way. So amethyst is a purple stone. It represents creativity. So if I'm in a mood to be creative, I'll wear a Malabi with amethyst and add some essential oils, either peppermint to help boost my energy. Or if I'm thinking that I want to be a little more at peace today, I'm feeling a little stressed, I might wear my Malabi that's made from the stem gemstone aquamarine, which is this blue grayish stone, and that actually represents peace, relaxation. And if I'm feeling that I need to get a little more grounded, maybe because I've been a little bit too hyper all day, is then I might wear some of my stones that are red, like for example, garnet, which represents more of the. If you're interested in yoga, there's a whole chakra system. That's the root chakra, which is the base of your energy, and so that helps ground myself. So those are some of the practices I do. Is like it reminds me to set an intention with my Molly beads. Like I want to be creative today, so I'll pick a Molly beads that represents that intention for today. And then I do my yoga or Pilates and Pilates. I like to mix it up in the morning, and then literally just a half an hour routine in the morning sets the tone for the rest of the day. In the evening, I'll just do a 15-minute slow down and set attention of what I want for the next day. And that's how I keep my energy to do all the things I'm randomly doing.
Yeah, exactly. I love it. Thanks so much for providing all those simple tips, to be honest, that our listeners can incorporate into their own daily grind. I picked up morning yoga recently during this time as well of COVID. I can feel the changes. Just making that simple habit change is really important. And I think can do a lot down the road. I sit at a desk like all the day, and especially while working remote, I'm sitting down more than I've done in the past. So it's really important to stretch it out or do things that to de-stress outside of work. So yeah, these are really great, and as you can tell, both of us have quite the energy to fuel our daily grinds out there. So speaking of your daily grind, this is a big overarching question, but maybe we can piece it down. Well, I wanted to ask it, Key. How have you shared your story or influenced others? I would say maybe do you have a recent success story from maybe one of your students in one of your classes, or someone that currently study, or someone that reached out to your podcast? One of your many works to pinpoint that you've come across that you could share to help motivate our listeners out there. Something that you've came across in your daily grind. They've your story has influenced them in their own life.
Yeah, I mean, so many there's so many different ways. 'Cause I interact with so many people in different ways, either through teaching or through my research or through my podcast. So I might share mine with my podcast. That's the most relevant, most recent. So with my podcast, it was more like a experiment to see. Okay, I'm gonna put this out there and see what happens. I'm interviewing people and they're sharing their stories, and also some of the episodes is also tips about public health, working in public health. I even have one of my episodes about the 7 dimensions of wellness, and I put these things out there because I'm just interested in it, and also it's becoming a nice way just to connect with people. And it wasn't until actually some like I got a few emails, like people actually emailed me who listened to my podcast saying that they liked this episode, and there was one that was particular about transitioning from their career as being a financial analyst to a career in public health. And I was so amazed. I thought, wow, like someone like it actually worked, right? That I have this podcast about public health and someone's actually interested in getting a job in public health. And so that to me is, it's an N of one. One person wrote about that. But still it just made me felt that wow, like someone with skill in with financial management is definitely has a skill that is very useful in public health. I mean, we have public health programs. There's always a need of better budgeting, better financial management. And so, and so I follow up with people about where they can get these resources and how they can maybe connect with different organizations to learn more about these different career paths. And once they learn about, okay, if this is something they're really interested in, I'll be happy to maybe revise their or look over their resume to see if they do apply for those positions. And then from there, and then I had a couple more about interested in public health, switching to different areas in public health. So these may be people who already have the degree in public health and they're thinking about, okay, I want to switch over, but how do I do that? And so, of course, then I will give different strategies in doing that because if you already have a degree in public health, but you want to get into a different field, like how do you make that transition? And then I had another email about the wellness plan that they felt that it was an aha moment for them, that they never had really thought about wellness as 7 dimensions. Like there's 7 ways of looking at wellness, and that because that there's 7 ways to look at it, it made making those goals, their wellness goals, more attainable. Because when people make these big goals at New Year's Eve, saying, "I want to get healthier, I want to eat healthier, or I want to like live longer, or I want to make more money," but they're just these very big goals, and if you don't make them tangible, right, into small bite sizes, it's not attainable. And so I also teach them about making smarter goals. And so in one of my episodes, I talk about making smarter goals, and this is actually in my wellness book, is that you want to make them specific, you want to make them measurable. So you want to be able to measure your outcomes. It should be achievable, right? Be attainable. So, if some people make these really big goals, but try to make them attainable that you can achieve in a year. Because if you can see progress, short-term progress, and it motivates you to keep on going. And so smarter, right? So SMA, attainable, right? So we talked about specific, measurable, attainable. R is realistic. So you want to make these realistic goals that you can achieve. And what I mean by realistic is being honest to yourself. Like, do you have the skill sets? If you don't have the skill sets, then either get educated, get a degree, or get an internship to learn these skills to achieve those goals. Or the other way is that can you barter with someone? Like, if you don't have the skill set, maybe you could train with someone, and you can train this person with your skill set, so you can trade off. If you don't have the money to go back to school, so not getting a skill set because you don't have money is just an excuse. So there's a lot of different ways you could do that. There's apprenticeship. So making sure you're being realistic and making sure you actually want to learn that skills, because I think a lot of people think that I want to learn this just to make money, which is fine. That's also a goal too, but it has to be something more personal. And then that's R, and then T is time. So making there's a time frame, right? So I want to eat healthier for the next 3 months, right? So that's attainable. And assess yourself. Like, did you make healthier choices within that 3 month window? And if you did, great. If not, then why not, right? So you want to be able to assess and measure your goals within a time frame. So that's what we call SMART goals. And I think a lot of people in management or in the general public heard of SMART goals. So those are SMART goals, right? So they're specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, in time. So in my wellness book, I added these two extra letters, which is ER, which is smarter. So don't make SMART goals, but make smarter goals. And what ER stands for is E is enthusiastic. So you got to be enthusiastic about your goals. If you're thinking about, oh, I have to eat healthier for next 3 months for the next 3 months. Okay, did you hear any enthusiasm? That just sounds like someone just had to force you to eat healthier, like you're either your wife or your husband or your mom or your dad. And so that's not going to work. It may last for those 3 months, but it's not going to be sustainable. So you have to be enthusiastic, like be excited about it. So if you're going to if you want to change your diet, pick a diet plan that you're excited about. There's about over 50 different diet plans out there. I think the US News Today always have every year they have a ranking report of all the different diets out there. And there's so many different diet plans, and see which one you resonate with, right? Everyone doesn't have to be on a vegan diet to live green, to eat green, right? You can have a mix of things, right? So pick the one that you're enthusiastic, because that's going to keep you through the 3 months or 6 months of your goal. And the R is a reason. So you need to have a personal reason, because I'm going to tell you, at the end of the 3 months, it's going to be hard for you to continue on. So that's why when you look at the New Year's resolution, everyone says, I want to work out. So in January, statistically in public health, we know this. Everyone's at the gym. Everyone's working out. Everyone buys an annual membership. And that's how gyms make money, is that they give you these bonuses at the beginning of the year because they know people are going to sign up. And then when you look at February and March, it starts to dip. And by March, statistically, like less than 20% of people are in, or is less than 20% are is full capacity, because it's not sustainable. Because people haven't really made goals that are realistic, that they're enthusiastic, and there's a personal reason. And you want to make sure your personal reason is personal. Like, I want to eat healthier because I want to be able to watch my kid graduate. I want to be healthier so I can take care of my parents or take care of my kids. I want to live healthier so I can live longer. So think about what's that personal reason, because then when the goings get tough, you can always remember that's the reason why, and be enthusiastic about it again, because that's there's always going to be ups and downs. That's just part of life. And that's one thing I learned about life, is that you can't rig yourself with disappointment or fear or any sadness, because that's actually part of the human development, is to go through those emotions and to breathe through it. Again, is to breathe through it so you can then go up the mountain again, and then it goes back down and go back up again. And so that's just part of life. So, so yeah, I would say that would be one of my ways of influencing, is through my podcast, which is a side bonus, because at first I was just starting this podcast for fun, and just seeing that people are actually writing to me that they listen to my podcast. And I showed this to my husband. I'm like, oh my gosh, can't believe someone wrote to me. And he's like, oh my gosh, you're too silly. Like, but yeah, I don't know. I get excited about that. So that keeps me, that's my enthusiasm that keeps me going and making my podcast, is that it's making a difference, even though one or two people. But so far, I got a few people, so I'm more than happy about that now.
Yeah, yeah, you got more. You got more than a few for sure. Yeah, you're quite on the similar timeline of the Daily Grind. Daily Grind launched last August, so basically right around Thanks. And it's really cool to see our listeners out there when you reach out to us, not just, write a podcast review, but send us emails or shout out us on your social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, wherever. It's really cool to see full circle, and it gives us, the excitement and energy, adds on to inspiring you out there in the world to achieve your own both personal and career goals, which is really cool. Your podcast story is great. So as we say on the Daily Grind, keep up the grind. But yeah, diving right into your wellness plan book. So as Key mentioned earlier on in this episode, she gifted me the book, and I instantly, as a book reader, I read the book and I take takeaways from it, or just kind of learn, develop my own personal goals and career goals. But like he mentioned earlier, it's when you develop these goals, these are personal, these are true to you. So my daily grind is different than your daily grind. Your daily grind is different than Key's daily grind. So you don't have to, create a goal just because someone says, oh, you should do this, or I'm going to try to achieve this goal because I want to make as much money as possible or make these people happy and not myself. You guys stay true to yourself and things like that. But I'll give an example or two of some of the things I've done in my own daily grind that I've been inspired from the wellness plan, and be able to create those smarter goals out there. So one of the things I mentioned earlier, I incorporated morning yoga into my own daily grind, again, to improve, because I want to, as an avid runner, I want to improve just my body and well-being, my core muscles, as well as I have a sore back, or I have a sore knee or a leg or wherever. So I wanted to really strengthen my body, and that was really important to me. So I was able to incorporate. I wrote out the skills. I really like, Key, how you lay it out in regards to you can make those mini changes. It's not like a day and night, like overnight success by any means. It takes time to change those simple habits and see progress as well, and continue to stay motivated. So for me, it took a while, and as well as just like every day, depending on, for me as a runner, to increase my mileage and how many miles I run weekly, I think it's a 10% increase is what they recommend, because if you go greater from like 0 to 50, you're more prone to injury. By any means, you're putting more pressure on your body, and or more pounding on your feet and whatnot. So me incorporating yoga, as well as just kind of incorporating other cross training things, I've done a lot of different. I've just had fun, in a sense, trying new activities out during this time as well. I picked up some golf lessons. So again, working different muscles of the body, but it's really great. Makes me think outside the box in regards to what can I do to improve this muscle, or stretch out this thing, or get a good workout and whatnot. So that's one of the examples I've done based on the wellness plan. Another one I've tried to focus on during this time, and I think a lot of daily grinders out there have done, is working remote, or since we're not doing a lot of face-to-face communications, we've been increasing our screen time a lot. So being on the computer or on your phone, or just watching TV or whatnot. So one of my many goals has been to have that off-screen time for myself. So for me, it involves a lot of different activities, but it's from meditating to turning off the lights at night at a certain time, opening up my book to read, things of that. So a lot of different, again, simple habit changes, many changes along the way that I've definitely improved. And my focus was to help improve my sleeping, which I have been making progress in. So kudos to Key and the wellness plan. And I think this is one way that I have utilized the book in my daily grind, and I hope others out there can do as well.
Oh, so wonderful, Kelly. I'm so glad that you apply some of the tips, and that it really shift your mindset that you can make these changes. And that habits are habits are hard to implement, but it's a lot of it about building tiny habits, and these tiny habits are more sticky, and that's what I guess we call it. That it's more sticky into your life. But I'm so happy to hear that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. Again, I thank you for gifting me that. And I think it's really inspired me and motivated me to, aspire towards achieving my personal and career goals. So again, you guys know me on the daily grind as a runner. I was supposed to do the Boston Marathon this April, and then it got canceled in September. So trying to improve my time, but these are mini habit changes that'll help me improve that, for hopefully, knock on wood, it goes on in 2021. We'll see. But yeah, those are just some examples. Again, that's from my own personal daily grind. So work on goals that are applicable to your own lifestyle, and things that can help improve you down the road. So yeah, speaking of down the road, we got the holidays coming up just around the corner. So Key, do you have some takeaways or advice for our listeners out there to incorporate the wellness plan into their own life, and especially during this time with Thanksgiving and Christmas and all a lot of stressful things going on?
Yeah, definitely. So, The Wellness Plan, which is a book that's available on Amazon, so you just have to Google or type in the search box the Wellness Plan, and the author is Dr. Kay Chan, the DNA Guide to Healthy Living. So first, I'll go over what is the seven dimension of wellness, because that's what the premise of the book is. And once you understand the seven dimension of wellness, is then you can create your own wellness plan. So the seven dimension of wellness is about thinking about your wellness is part of these seven dimensions. They're equally important, but you can focus on one of them, two of them, or all seven, based on what is most important to you at this particular time. And so when people think of wellness, they think it's this really abstract thing that have to do everything all at once. But no, I what I like to teach is that, well, let's cut it down to bite size, because if the overall long term goal is to live a healthy lifestyle, you don't have to do it overnight, right? I think that's the stress that people put into this house, is that you can divide them up into these seven dimensions. So the first one is physical wellness, and the second one is intellectual wellness. The third is emotional wellness. The fourth is spiritual wellness. And so these are the four dimensions that I like to think of as their inner dimensions, where they're about yourself. And then once you understand these inner dimensions, then we look at the outer dimensions, which is going to be social wellness, your occupational wellness, and environmental wellness. And so those are the seven dimensions that I talk about in the book. And I'll go over some of the tips and concepts that you could apply, especially during this time, regardless if it's coronavirus pandemic or anything. But I think it's also related to just it's a stressful time. The holidays are coming up. Regardless if it was coronavirus pandemic, it's just I think holidays does bring up a bit of a stress, either that I have to do all this shopping, I have to do all this preparation, but then at the same time, like who's making you do all those things, right? It's also changing the mindset that do I have to put all this extra stress? Can you outsource things? And so it's really thinking about shifting your mindset about what needs to be done and and how to prioritize what's most important to you. And again, self care is not selfish. So let's start with physical wellness. So what is physical wellness? And that's is basically the sense of being feeling connected with your body to move smoothly, gracefully at the full capacity. Again, it's about moving smoothly and gracefully. It's not about being, building a bodybuilder, or, putting on a lot of weight or losing a lot of weight. It's really about moving. And if you think about it from that really micro level, that it's really about moving gracefully. Because when you want to be able to over time age, we're all going to age at some point, right? We can't counter that. But we want to be able to age into our elderly years, that we can still continue to move gracefully. And so when you think about that as the low bar, right, is then that all you have to do is just incorporate movement throughout the day. So physical wellness is about the foundation of the rest of dimension. Because when you work on your physical wellness, which is what Kelly actually has worked on through creating these smarter goals, is that you will not only help yourself move better, you will feel better, which is your emotional wellness. And when you feel better, you start to think better, which is your intellectual wellness. And when you're able to think better, you'll actually activate a creative part of your brain to think about how can I serve others better beyond yourself, which is spiritual wellness. So, that we just covered four wellnesses, right? Which is physical, emotional, intellectual, and spiritual wellness, just by rethinking about how you define your physical wellness. It's just about moving gracefully, mindfully. And then once you have that, then you start to think about, well, how can I connect better with my friends and family, which is their social wellness. And then once you're able to think about, oh, how I can create a social network that can help me and I can help them to become more mindful about their movement throughout their day, throughout their life, you will become much more productive at work, which is your occupational wellness, which is, think of your job wellness or work wellness. And then you then want to then create a better world, because then you're thinking, okay, if I could make this better at my workplace, what else can I do to create our community better? And so you take what you do at work and share those gifts at a larger capacity. And so that's environmental wellness. So thinking about, you know, that wellness is not this very abstract thing, but that it could be carved up into these 7 different aspects of wellness, makes it much more attainable. So if you want to work on your intellectual wellness, there's activities that I talk about in the book that you can help maybe help sharpen those skill sets and makes you start thinking about like what intellectual wellness is and what are some things that you could do throughout the day. So physical wellness, you could have these smarter goals that can reach your own personal goals about what you define as physical wellness. And so for physical wellness, there's an activity that I like to tell your audience is that think about what brought you joy when you were a child. And can you incorporate this childhood activity into your day? Was it running? Was it doing jumping jacks? Was it it was a hopscotch, right? Just something silly. And just thinking about like when you're 6 years old or 8 years old, what brought you joy at recess? And it was just running around, just moving, right? Getting your energy and dancing around. So think about how can you incorporate like just 5 to 10 minutes of that into your day and that what that would do is it will spark up energy in your body, and your energy in your body would then motivate you to consider, "Oh, now I have energy in my body, I have energy in my brain. I will start to look up things that I could do that I could maybe work better in toning my arms or, if I'm preparing for a marathon, what are good habits, right?" So, in order to get to that next step is you have to have a little spark to get to that next step to even look up things to do, to look up things to do to help achieve your other physical goals. And so that's one thing I think about like during the holidays, right? Because we're so focused on getting that turkey to bake on Thanksgiving at the right temperature so all the food looks great, right? And so there's a lot of stress to that, right? You're constantly going to shopping, or I guess now because of COVID, where you have to cover your mask or you have to just be careful when you're shopping. And which is true, right? You have to do that too. But then that also helps you slow down. So when you go to the grocery store, it's thinking about, all right, so I have to get all these ingredients. So how can I incorporate some movements during the grocery store, right? Maybe swinging my arms, right? Or being mindful what I'm looking at, right? And so when you go to the store, just being mindful of like looking at things, right? Instead of just rushing to get things. And so just being more mindful of your environment. And so that is also a meditative state, right? It's just taking in what you see, the colors, the smell, right? I mean, I know that now with coronavirus, people are trying to just go in and out of stores, but even for 5 to 10 minute shopping, right? Maybe normally you shop for 30 minutes, but that 5 to 10 minutes of shopping, you can even make that experience more mindful. And so that then makes your body more mindful of when it's moving around. And then so the second wellness was intellectual wellness, which is how we stay challenged and curious about the things in life. So you want to think about what are some new hobbies that you can explore right now with since we're all locked in, right? And can you consider learning a new skill? Or with the holidays coming up, maybe learning a new fun recipe, right? A new activity you could do with your family because you can't go outside, you can't travel. I've heard that a lot of people, what they do is they recreated a room into a jungle, right? So they bought plants and they colored a room to be green. And so rethinking about how you can recreate those outer external environment experiences more indoor takes some brain waves and brain power. So again, you are then working your intellectual wellness by challenging yourself and being curious, like, could we do that, right? Or even playing with your mind to play the devil advocate, right? Is to like think, well, how might we do this, or how might we not do that, right? And so thinking about how we could recreate different experience indoor is another way for intellectual wellness, especially during this holiday season, is to be creative with that. And you can actually Google things. You can say like, what are some virtual parties happening for Halloween? I heard that people are putting on their costumes, doing a Zoom party, and so those are different ways. Or there's a lot of immersive experiences online right now that you can look up on Eventbrite. That's free that you can attend, or maybe just pay a small amount of money to attend. So there's a lot of different things you could do for intellectual wellness. Um, and then emotional wellness is how well we connect with others based on our values, our beliefs and feelings about ourselves, our experience, and our interaction between ourselves and the experience. So during this holiday season, we're oftentimes feeling very stressed. And so one question I like to ask myself is like, where is this stress stemming from? Is it stemming from the actual current is it stemming from the current cues, or is it stemming from something more deeply? Is it based on like I had a bad experience from last year's stressful event, and that's why it's like it's resonating again. And so what happened in past day in the past? So it's sitting with those uncomfortable feelings and understanding like where did it come from? And why is it revisiting me today? Why are these feelings, affecting me today? And is there a certain environmental cues that's triggering you that? If it is triggering you that, then you might want to think about, okay, how can I remove these external cues so that it doesn't trigger me feeling this way? Or that's one way, right? Is to remove that environment. Or either if you can't remove that environmental factor, is to sit with it and to understand that I'm gonna have to live with this environmental cue, but I am not going to let it overpower me. So that's emotional wellness, right? It's understanding what's driving those emotions. And I sit with it with emotion and let it actually rise through your heart and through your throat and to your mind. I know that's a scary feeling. People like I most people want to rid themselves of fear and any discomfort. But like I said, life is not about just ups, right? There's always downs. So it's living through those disappointments and we can't rid ourselves of disappointment and let it sit there for just 90 seconds. So I don't want you to dwell on these feelings, but at least 90 seconds. And that's only a minute and a half. Just even put a timer on your iPhone and release it. Exhale it out. Accept them, experience them, and then release them. And that's an emotional wellness highly recommend if you're feeling this way about the holidays, right? Is understand where it comes from, accept them if you can't remove them from your environment, right? And if this is like a person who's stressing you out, you can't remove that person in your life, but accept them that all right, they're just part of my life, and how can I accept them who they are, experience this feeling and release this negative feeling. And so that's one way you can deal with emotional wellness. The fourth one is spiritual wellness, is how well you have a strong understanding of your purpose in life and how you experience love, joy, and peace, and even sadness. And that's actually part of spiritual wellness is our growth. And I think especially with the holidays in December, regardless if you're Christian or not, you experience Christmas or Hanukkah or all the other holidays happening in December, is that I think everyone has a very spiritual connection to what they believe, whether that's God or the universe or Buddha or Mother Nature, is to just have your own personal definition with that. And that's going to help shape your view of what the meaning of life is. And I think having that as your own personal mantra is very important. And you don't have to share that with people. Everyone has their own personal definition of what spiritual wellness is. It's a good way for you to define what that is and how you can have a better understanding of where that is, what brings you peace. And the fifth is social wellness, is how well we relate to our families and friends. And especially during the holidays, this is where we're almost overwhelmed with people in our lives. And so I think one thing that we oftentimes is challenges is that's challenging during these holidays that there's so many people with so many different personalities all in the same room, all on the same day, either for Christmas or some holiday or Thanksgiving, right? So how do you handle this? And I think one of the issues is miscommunication. And so that's one of the things that I think happens in families, miscommunication during these holidays. And there's one of my favorite books is written by Gary Chapman, which is called The Five Love Languages. And I think people think like, oh, is this about emotional relationships? Like, no, it's actually about communication. Believe it or not, the title itself is misleading because it says five love languages, but it's really a book about communication styles. It's really about we have certain preferences and are stronger at communicating with one particular style. But what's surprising about the book is that we actually have the capacity to communicate with all five styles of communication. So we have it in us that we can communicate with all these different styles. It's a matter of choice and the will and understanding. And so the five communication style is that one is sharing gifts. So these are people who like to give things and also like to receive things as their way of communicating. So who are those people? Those are the people who like to come over when you say, oh, come over, don't bring anything. And they come over and they bring a bottle of wine or they make something, right? So you know that, oh, they like to communicate by sharing gifts, right? The second one is providing services. So these are the people who like to help out without you even asking for help, right? That's their way of communicating with you. The third one is saying words. So these are people who likes praises or likes compliments or likes some constructive feedback, and so you want to make sure you communicate in that way. So if you give a gift, they're not going to receive the same feeling positive about it unless you say good job, right? So they would rather have you say good job than you just giving them like a gift. So that's an example of like how saying words is their way of communicating or hearing words. The fourth one is spending quality time. So these are people who love to communicate by actually being there with you. So when you communicate and saying, "Oh, I'll stop by," so are these people that are actually calling you, right? They're just calling you on the phone. So that's just maybe spending some time, but they're also saying words. But they're or these are people who are like spending time actually physically there. They actually drive over. They could just sit in the room with you and they don't have to talk, but they're just spending time with you. And so that's their way of communicating is like spending time. And the fifth is giving personal touch. This is the easiest. These are the people who just love giving hugs. Like they're the person expressing a hug. And that's their way of communicating is just a hug, a high five. And so we all have the capacity to do all five. It's just that we have a stronger preference for one versus the other. And once you understand that, you can shift your way of communicating based on how that person communicates. And I think that's the one thing that we oftentimes miscommunicate is that we communicate the way we want to communicate. So if I communicate by giving a personal touch and I give hugs to everybody and even the people who don't like giving hugs, then that person is not going to receive the same positive experience, right? Because they don't like to be hugged, right? But if I knew that, oh, they don't like personal touch, but they like sharing gifts. So maybe instead of giving a hug, I would give them a bottle of wine when I visit them. And that is another way of communicating that I appreciate you inviting me over for dinner for this holiday. So again, something as simple as that is that when you're going to a holiday party is to understand the different communication style of your guests, of your family and friends. And so that would actually relieve a lot of stress of how you're communicating. Because I think that's what happens in a lot of these parties is that people are just communicating one style, but you can actually shift your style based on how that person communicates. And I know that you're probably thinking, well, that person is not communicating the way I want to. Well, at least one part, at least you're not so stressed now, right? So it works 50% of the time. But hopefully over time, those people will kind of understand like, oh, you like giving hugs or you don't like getting hugs, and they would shift accordingly. And so that's number 5. Number 6 is occupational wellness, is how well you feel toward your purpose at work. Whether you're working at a physical location or at home, if you're like a stay-at-home mom, that's also like a huge job. I would say that's like probably the biggest job out there. Is what's your feeling about your energy in your living and workspace? And thinking about why you're doing what you're doing and are you at your full capacity to do these activities so you can live your best life. And so that's what I would say occupational wellness is thinking about what's your long-term goals and professionally and personally and how that interconnect. And the seventh last one is environmental wellness. And I think oftentimes people confuse this as like, oh, it's about recycling or being green, which is part of it. But environmental wellness is really more about being aware of your surrounding and assess what motivates and demotivates yourself. So looking around your surrounding, your house or your workplace, and remove any distraction toward your wellness goal. Because your environmental factors can actually change your mindset and also impact how well you're going to achieve those wellness goals. And so that's what environmental wellness is like thinking about how you can keep your environment aligned with your personal goals. And in my book, I go over different steps, different tips, and how you can address these different wellness. So hopefully that was a nice little summary of how to get through the holidays during this. It's a fun time, but it can also bring up a lot of stress and unintentionally.
Yeah, really well said, Key. Thank you so much for providing the definitions behind the 7 dimensions of wellness. I think this is really important. Lots of key takeaways, especially during this holiday season. You've provided some really great examples. Yeah, listeners, stay tuned. Again, we'll put the where to buy, where to purchase, and where to find the wellness plan book in today's show notes. As always, then you can be on your journey to incorporate this into your own daily grind, which is super important. And again, learn from the best here, Dr. Key Chan. You mentioned Gary Chapman, The Five Love Languages, as one of books on top of your own book and your podcast, What is Public Health? Do you have other recommendations on different mediums our listeners should check out as well?
Yeah, so one of my other favorite books is called The Power of Now from Eckhart Tolle. That book really shifted my way of thinking about how to use time or how to think about time and the essence of time, what the definition of time is. Because I think that's what brings a lot of stress into our lives is like we feel like, oh, we're running out of time, or I don't have enough time to do this, or you want to spend time with your family, but you're like, I don't have time for that because I have to get this work done. Or or when you're spending time with your family, you feel guilty for not doing the work that needs to be done. And so reading the book Power of Now really shift my mindset of definition of time. That time is when we label time, it's more that us as humans, we label time to give it some measurable dimension so we can measure our outcome. But when we think of time as being timeless and that we can be more mindful about where we are right now, we're more present. And when we're more present, we can actually experience more of this experience today, because that's all we have is just this very first is this moment of now. And so I really like that book because it really shifted my mindset about time, and especially if you're a person like me who have so many different projects and so many different things and so many different hobbies, and you want to do everything but you're feeling stressed. I never feel stressed about all the different things I do. I actually enjoy doing all the different things I do. And even sometimes people think like, how can you do all these different things? And they feel stressed about listening to my things. But I said, like, no, I do one thing. And when I'm doing one activity, I'm in the presence of doing that activity. When I'm feeling that I need to do Pilates, I do Pilates. When I'm doing yoga, I'll do yoga. If I need to write my textbook, I'm writing my textbook. If I need to do this, I do this. And so I want to experience every single activity to its fullest capacity by being present. Because if you don't, if you're for example doing your yoga, but you're thinking about work, you're thinking about your kids, or you're thinking about other things, you just basically rob that experience of doing yoga by incorporating all those different random thoughts in your head. And so being in the power of now really focuses on being mindful. And again, it goes down to meditation. And this is where I think the practice of meditation is so important, because it helps train your brain to be in the present moment. Because when you focus on meditation practices such as the mantra, using your mala beads, or just breathing in, inhale and exhaling, just focusing on your breath, your brain cannot think of another thing. Believe it or not, when it's focused on one thought, it's just focused on that one thought. Now I know that we're thinking like, well, how come I have all these random thoughts? Well, because you're allowing it, but it's okay. Allow it to flow through your head and be mindful that, oh, I had this random thought, but I see it. I'm going to let it float away. I'm going to bring it back to my breath, and I'm going to breathe in and out. And over time, you're going to extend that meditative experience longer, from a minute to 5 minutes to 10 minutes. And so when you're doing an activity, you're in the now. And so I would say that's a book that I would highly recommend. One of my favorite authors is Marianne Williamson. I don't know if you guys have read her books. I really love her books. She also writes in a very thoughtful way about mindfulness and about spiritual practices. So I really love her books, and I would say those are my two favorite outlets, is reading books, nonfiction books on health and wellness.
Well, this is great, Key. We'll put again her recommendations in today's show notes. Yeah, Key, we talked about your daily schedule, all the things that you have going on. What's on your daily grind in the upcoming months later this year? I guess, yeah, later in 2020, we're almost getting to the end of the year. Anything you want to share too for early 2021?
Yeah, so my daily grind right now is I need to finish writing my textbook. So I'm trying to be mindful about getting these chapters into my publisher, and it needs to be submitted by early 2021. So that's my daily grind right now, is carving time to revise some of these chapters and getting it done. And so that's my daily grind. And there's days I have to admit that it's hard to pick up, I wouldn't say pencil, but like, let's pick up a keyboard to type and sit down. And I just have to just really get into the mode and think, okay, I need to get this done because there's this deadline. And I think back to my smarter goals, is that, okay, I don't have to finish this whole chapter. I can finish this sub chapter within a sub chapter. So that's only like 500 words. So 500 words is basically a page and a half. I can write a page and a half in half an hour. So I just think about like this gigantic textbook, which is already like 800 pages so far, and they want us to write more pages. But it's just, I'm like thinking, okay, I got through 800 pages. I could definitely write another page and a half. And so again, it's like thinking about these goals that may be so overwhelming into these more tangible steps. And like half an hour, well, I could just give up watching half an hour of Friends or some Sex in the City episode or something and write this textbook. And so it's thinking about how to reorganize your time and being in the now. Like, okay, I'm going to write my textbook during this time. And then and so that's how I think of my daily grind right now. My other daily grind is like my podcast, which is I also interview people, I schedule interviews, and I'm also thinking about incorporating in the year 2021 episodes that are more about tips about public health practices. So more about tools, looking at what are some of the huge issues that are happening in public health, and making these like mini habits or mini tips on my episodes. So that's one of my daily grind, is like repurposing a lot of the content that I teach, at at the university or at a larger scale, making it more tangible that people can just pick up, like, oh, tips for the day, like how to create a budget or how to create a communication plan to your stakeholders. And so these 15-minute tips about in public health, but it could be applicable to anyone in the workforce that you could apply some of these skill sets. So I guess these are my daily grind, and also incorporating yoga and Pilates and meditation, definitely.
Wonderful. Yeah, quite the grind you have going on there, Key. Love it. Yeah, think smarter goals. That's super important. Again, time is valuable, and ways to organize it is just as important. So, really well said. Yeah, Key, do you have a word of the day or a motivational quote to inspire our listeners out there?
So I guess I have two quotes. So the first one is "Just do it," like the Nike commercial, and my favorite quote that I always say, like when I'm not around students, is like, "Just get shit done." Seriously, like my favorite quote is like, just get it done, and because sometimes when we just think too much about it, again, we're not being in a now, and it's just like get it done. So it's just do it. And sometimes when we think about it too much, then we almost convince ourselves to not do it anymore. So again, it's about being mindful, and again, being part of the now is knowing that you have all. Because if you were thinking about doing whatever you were doing, there was probably a reason why that seed of a thought was planted in you, either through the universe or God, if you believe in the universal power. That I believe that I wouldn't have thought about doing this task if there was a purpose of why it was planted in my head. And then don't be afraid to pursue that, and just do it, like literally just do it. And it just takes that first step. Again, like writing a book, I know a lot of friends and colleagues have been talking about writing their books. And I had a colleague that was talking about writing her book for like 10 years and still hasn't even picked up a paper or typed a word. And I don't know what it is that's holding her back. But the minute I thought I'm going to write a book, I got first have to write an outline, get a publisher, and just get it in. And if they say no, then move to another publisher. And so a lot of it is just figuring out, again, creating a small little baby step. It's like create a title, create an outline, and then have someone read it, and then submitting it. And so that's an example of how you can just do it, but also do it in a very smarter way. Like again, using smarter goals as a way to help preface what you're doing.
They're great, Keith. Thank you so much for providing those motivational quotes out there. I think they fit perfectly with today's episode. This has been quite the interview. Last but not least, Dr. Keechan, if listeners have questions, comments, want to get in touch with you, want to tune into What is Public Health podcast, read your book, how can they do so after this episode?
Yeah, I definitely love to connect with your audience. So they can connect with me many different ways. So again, with my podcast, which is called What is Public Health, it's available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, Anchor, Overcast, all the different big podcast channels. And it was actually on Amazon Music now. I know Amazon Music Podcast is now hosting podcasts. So I was very happy that just maybe 2 weeks ago it was approved. So it's also on there as well if you want to listen to my podcast. And then on my podcast, you'll see a link to my website, which is called whatispublichealthpodcast.com. And so you'll find all the different episodes, and you'll find my contact information there. You can contact me by email. My email is Dr. Keechan. So it's DrKeeChan at gmail.com. So it's basically Dr. Keechan at gmail.com. And you can email me directly if you have any questions. And if you're working in public health, definitely connect with me. I'd love to interview you for my podcast. And if you're interested in my wellness plan, definitely let me know if you do buy it. Love to know how it works for you. I'm actually in the process, and I guess this is a daily grind for year 2021. Is based on popular demand. People really want my class again because I was teaching it at Stanford for several years, and I kind of shifted to a different job, so I'm not doing that right now. But people are very interested in my online class again. So I am in the process of creating an online class, or like an online program based on the wellness plan that people can take and apply some of the skills. And we'll have like small groups, and wellness circles that they can work together as cohorts to keep each other accountable. And so I'm planning that for the year 2021. So if you're interested in being part of this wellness circle, as based on my wellness plan, definitely check out my website, which is the What is Public Health podcast. Because on there you'll see a tab, wellness course, and on there's a sign up sheet to learn about the launch of the course. And if you sign up, you also get like a free wellness planner, which is a smaller version of a planner that helps you create your goals for next year. So if you're interested in being a part of this program, definitely sign up for that. And then I'm on Instagram. So you can also follow me on Instagram, which is my podcast, which is What is Public Health Podcast is the Instagram handler. So you can find me there and tag me there. Oh yeah, and the wellness plan book is available on Amazon, so you can buy it there if you're interested. And if you like mala beads, my Etsy store is Energy Mala. You can buy those mala bead bracelets and necklaces to use to help you meditate, to set your mantra. And when I ship out my gifts to you, I'm very happy that my mala beads found a new home in your home. I usually also send some special bonuses like a mantra card, some essential oils to help to accompany you to your spiritual practice, and those are just free bonuses if you do buy something from my Zenergy Mala at the Etsy store.
Wonderful. We'll put all of Key's contact information, where to find the latest and greatest podcast, website, email, social media, all over in today's show notes, as always. So thanks again for tuning in today's episode. A big thank you to Dr. Key for being on the podcast. Countdown until Thanksgiving week begins. The Kelly Johnson Foundation is hosting not one, but 2 turkey trots this year. We would like to see you involved in our in-person Wisconsin race or virtual Illinois based, but you can race anywhere. Our in-person Wisconsin Turkey Trot is being held Saturday, November 28th, and our virtual Turkey Trot is being held Thanksgiving Day, Thursday, November 26th. We'd love to see you run, walk, or gobble in our turkey trots this year. Our online registration is open at www.kjfwi.org. Last but not least, a huge shout out to all of our sponsors that are making our race events happen. Thank you so much. I'd like to give a quick shout out to our daily grinders listening to us on the pod or have been grinding with us since season 1. Feel free to check out our journey so far and share your feedback with us. Give us a rating and quick review on Apple. Virtual high five to you in advance. To find the Daily Grind, follow us on Instagram at Daily Grind Pod and on Twitter as well. Check out our website at www.kjfwi.org. Daily Grind Pod, official podcast of the Kelly Johnson Foundation. Until next time, my name is Kelly Johnson. Have a great day.
Thank you so much, Kelly. I really enjoyed this. Thank you so much.